Hello and welcome to News 9. I'm with Dr. Philipp Ackermann, Germany's ambassador to India. Dr. Ackermann, welcome to News 9.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Ackermann, straight off the bat, President Putin said yesterday that he was ready for talks without conditions on Ukraine. Does that mean the Ukraine war, Russia's war in Ukraine, will end as soon as President Donald Trump assumes office next month?
So you might remember that Donald Trump promised to solve this conflict in a day, as he said, so very quickly. And hopes are high that things will go a better way. We have to say, however, that no solution is possible without the involvement of Ukraine proper. We can't just have a negotiation between Washington and Moscow, and Ukraine is not taken into consideration. So I think we are all for a ceasefire. We are all for stop of the war and the shooting and the fighting. Unless Ukraine is not involved, that is very difficult, I would say.
Absolutely. How do you see the war presently as the German perspective on the war in Europe? It's the deadliest war since the Second World War in Europe. It's being fought on your soil, on European territory. The Russians claim that they're advancing at a rate of 30 kilometers a day. We've seen that in interviews recently. What's your assessment of this war?
So I think you have to see Russian propaganda, with the grain of salt which is needed in here. But I think there is no doubt that the Russian army is making some progress, slow progress, under enormous losses. They say 1,500 a day, Russian soldiers dead. So this is an enormous sacrifice here for the nation, which is not being discussed in Russia, as far as I know. So that's a disaster, actually, for the Russian nation. So basically, I think we are in a very difficult situation. Let me say, but in my lifetime, I wouldn't have thought that a war in Europe would be possible after what we have gone through in the Second World War. And we are still, shocked by the fact that the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine has lasted now over 2 years and is as bloody as one can imagine only. So I would say it's high time to find some solution to this conflict. But as I said before, Ukraine must be part of the solution. Without Ukraine, there can't be any.
You see loss of territory of Ukraine as being a fait accompli, which is what the Russians are talking about, that they are unlikely to give up the territory that they've already captured.
So far, the Russians have always said we are ready to talk with the conditions met, and the conditions are: give us the territory of Ukraine we are occupying, and second, very, very important, no foreign soldiers on Ukraine's territory, and no membership to any defense alliance of Ukraine. Now, I would say that's an infringement in a sovereign nation's decision, and therefore I think you have to be very, very cautious to involve Ukraine from the very first step in these negotiations. We can't have a solution without Ukraine at the table.
Absolutely, no solution without Ukraine. But all the EU countries, all of NATO is watching this war unfold. And there is talk of a rearmament of Europe that is already underway. Germany is one of the biggest contributors to this. How do you see this rearmament of Europe taking shape, irrespective of the outcome of the war, whether there's war or there's peace?
So can I say that we are not only watching this war, we are contributing to Ukraine's ability to defend itself. So it's a huge sacrifice for every European nation. We are paying, Germany is the second donor after the US to the Ukrainian army, equipment-wise and others. So for us, this Ukraine war is more than only, a nervous watching. It's also a commitment we have made. And the commitment is freedom in Europe, and freedom in Europe and respect of borders and respect of other nations, sovereign nations. That's the recipe through which Europe worked after 45 in a period of 80 years of peace, which it has never seen before. So I would say the rearmament is a direct consequence of what we've seen in Ukraine. Europe was of the opinion, my country in particular was of the opinion, that war is not an option for Europe anymore. Now that has proven to be wrong, and therefore I think armament is needed right now, and therefore my country, as many others, also have increased tremendously their defense budgets. You've seen, in addition to that, you have seen 2 new NATO members. You know, when somebody would have told me 5 years ago that Finland and Sweden would be member of NATO, I would have said you must be joking. Yeah? And now you see where we are, and so basically, you know, Russia is perceived as a threat to Europe, and therefore Europe must, you know, increase its defense capabilities to be ready and prepare to defend itself if need be.
Right, absolutely. And one of President Trump's or President-elect Trump's bugbears has been the fact that not all of the European members are paying equally for NATO. Germany, of course, is a top contributor, but there are other countries that aren't paying enough to ensure that NATO becomes a strong, credible military alliance. What are your views on that? What are Germany's views on that?
So actually, to be very honest, President Trump was very critical about Germany in his first tenure, because Germany had by then only, I think, 1.3% of its GDP or 4% of its GDP paying into you know, the NATO budget overall, or the NATO defense capabilities overall. Now that has changed completely. We are now at 2%, and the number will go up. So I think we can expect more requirements from the American side once President Trump has started his tenure, the second tenure. But at the same time, we see that, you know, it's not only the Americans that made us fire up our defense capabilities, it's just the situation on the ground. So I think there is a consensus in Germany, even with the center-left parties, that we need to do more for our defense capabilities. And that's what we started, and this will be what we will continue.
Absolutely. So a few months back, Chancellor Olaf Scholz was in New Delhi, a very historic visit, a very large delegation, and a very determined, if I can say, focus on India, which is this document that your government brought out ahead of his visit. You know, Germany in the past has made 2 very significant bets. One on cheap Russian gas in the 1970s, which possibly was a mistake if you look at it in hindsight. And then to rely on China as a manufacturing partner, which now you're talking of China plus one. Is India now the China plus one model for Germany? How does Germany view India in the light of this document and this renewed focus on India?
So you are talking about this document, which is a unique document. The German government hasn't come up with a document, a comparable or a similar document with any other country. So it is a long process where every ministry comes together and defines its, you know, the areas of cooperation, and then it was brought together in a paper that went through the Council of Ministers, the cabinet, and got sort of the rubber stamp of the Chancellor. So this is a very unique document, and it shows our commitment to this strategic partnership with India. Now that's not only a business partnership, although business is an important part of it, but it's a sort of comprehensive, strategic, military, political, business, climate action. So that's what makes this document so interesting, because it really covers everything. We have a couple of very, very interesting areas where Germany and India work closely together and will do so even more in the future. And this is sort of the book by which we play now, this partnership, and therefore I'm very happy that it exists. You mentioned, and I find that very interesting, that you say, at hindsight, I would say it is a mistake to rely too much on one energy source. I think you know, countries change over time. The moment you started you know, getting your reliable and relatively cheap gas from Russia, it was a fantastic opportunity for the German business. I think Russia also developed in some way we at that time couldn't foresee, but it is, I think, a wiser decision from the get-go to diversify more. I think that's what we learned. Now, China is maybe a little different, because also China changed very much over the last 15, 20 years. You know, we started doing business with a much more open-minded, liberal, relaxed China. Now China has become very assertive, has become very aggressive to some extent in the region. You have been a victim of that yourself. And therefore we have to change our attitude towards China. But in China, German business have done and still do a lot of good business. And therefore, it will be always an economic partner. We will not give up China. But what the government does now is encouraging German business to see to it that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that means you have to look to other shores. And India comes to mind, of course. It's market-wise similar to China, and will, with the growth rates you have in this country, will be an ever more interesting market for us. And what we see right now is that there is a renewed or a fresh interest in getting to India as an investment country. Now, we all know this is not an uncomplicated country. There are also some challenges on the way, but generally speaking, I would say the fact that the Asia-Pacific Conference of the German business this year took place in Delhi was a very strong signal in this direction.
Absolutely. And in there's a very interesting paragraph in this report, which I just want to read out, which says that we, as in Germany wants India to rely more strongly on German arms companies as partners in future, not least so that it can free itself further from its arms-related orientation towards Russia. Right. It's a very important line there. You're saying that Germany wants to make India move away from reliance on Russian arms and come towards German weapons.
It's a very interesting phrase. Our reputation is that we are relatively blunt people, and this is a very blunt sentence. But what we did with the gas from Russia, you did with defense production from Russia in a way. For the last 70 years, you relied heavily on Russian arms production. And, I think the German government came to understand if you want to loosen this embrace, you have to put something on the table. You have to make offers to India in order to diversify its defense equipment and the composition of its defense equipment. And therefore, I think what we have seen in the last 2 years is that Germany came forward very strongly with offers to the Indian side in order to, sell German defense productions in India, and this is even more important, to join hands with India and do common projects like we see with the submarines now, where we, together with TKMS, a German company, together with MDL, the shipyard from Mumbai, bid for a tender for submarines. And that is, I think, the future of Indo-German cooperation in the defense area.
You've already sold submarines in the past, as West Germany in the early 80s, and they're very robust submarines, and they're still in service after more than 4 decades with the Indian Navy. What makes you think that the TKMS deal, the TKMS MDL consortium, is better placed than your competitor, which is a fellow European country, Spain?
Our friends from Spain, I know.
Your friends from Spain, Navantia, which is partnering with L&T to offer rival submarines. What makes you think that the German offer is better than the Spanish offer?
Look, I think first reasons you gave, the Indian Navy has been working with German submarines for a long, long time, and they are still running, and they are good, as I hear from the Indian Navy. The second element is this air-independent propulsion that, the German system in our TKMS submarines is really, really very... it's an experienced technique. It has gone through different levels of modernization, but it is a very, very sound and reliable technique. And the reach out is phenomenal. You can go from Vishakhapatnam to Colombo, basically, with this submarine. It's a very, very interesting military equipment, and it is, as I said before, a joint project. It's an Indo-German project. 60% or 50% or 60%, I don't know exactly, but will be produced here and together with MDL. So I think it is a win-win situation for both. The German government has made its support for the submarine very, very clear. Right. So you remember the Minister of Defense came. Yes. He was present when both companies signed the joint venture or the common bidding attempt. And I think that even the Chancellor, when he was here, at several occasions mentioned the submarine deal. So the German government is clearly behind it. I think it's an excellent product. MDL is a very good partner. I'm in constant contact also with TKMS. So we are hopeful that once the decision will be taken, we will be the the one that will bring the Indian Navy to a next level technology.
How critical is this contract really for Germany and for the Indo-German security collaboration?
So let me say that TKMS is a very, very well-performing company. You might have seen that there is now a contract for another, I think, 6 or 8 submarines from Norway and Germany jointly. We have jointly developed a technique where Norway and Germany are buying, the German Navy is buying also from TKMS. So I would say the books are full. It's not a survival contract, but we, from the German government side, and I'm representing the German government here, we feel that this contract would be an enormous step forward when it comes to this idea that Germany wants to become a stable security partner for India. So it will be of significant importance.
Significant importance indeed. But are there other contracts apart from this which Germany would be partnering?
By now, I think India has become our 6th outside NATO. No, that's don't let me get that wrong. So it's number 6 in the arms export list of countries, and it's approximately the same, a little less than we sell to the US. So you see how high it has been moving up in the ladder over the last 2 years. It's a mix of things we do. There are power tools and boxes for tanks, and there are technology items. So it's a broad variation, and defense industry is very, very interested in India right now, and as the approval is going so quickly now in Germany, so it's a very interesting market. So you'll see a broad range of products that we are selling to India.
Right. So, Germany and India have had a strategic partnership for almost a quarter of a century. Next year is going to be 25 years since we signed a strategic partnership. It's been a mystery for many Indians that why we never really had a very robust defense partnership when you're talking of the sales of military hardware. What are the reasons for this? And how are you turning the clock back?
It's a very interesting question. I agree that it sounds a little strange, but so defense exports or defense arms production exports have never had a very good reputation in Germany. So that's a post-war element. We had always had sort of center-right, center-left governments, and mainly the left parties, also the Green Party, who are now in the government, they were very reluctant to export arms outside NATO generally. So we had, unlike other European partners, we had always our feet on the brake when it comes to arms export. And I think that has changed through Russia, through Ukraine. We now have a clearly center-left government, and this center-left government has changed its arms production policy completely with some selected partners, and India is one of them. We have increased our defense exchange of production exchange because we felt this is a opportunity which we will not miss. The like-minded countries in this world, in this very difficult world, should get together and also, make their armed forces or bring their armed forces to a level that is, can I say, worth and noticeable to every country in the region. We are interested that Indian armed forces have a good level of deterrence also, and that's one of the reasons why we might be much more.
Absolutely. But you also mentioned, Dr. Ackermann, the fact that Germany and Europe are rearming to face the threat from Russia, as you mentioned. Are you confident that Germany would be able to meet the requirements for India's military-industrial complex while rearming itself and its partners in Europe?
Yeah, I think we can do that. We have a very, very sound defense industry. The German defense industry was always very active in Europe, has sold many, many things to other European countries, which was never a problem. So I think what we do with India, what France does with India, perfectly fits in the general rearmament process we are undergoing in our own country. So no problem there, I would say.
No problem there. Moving on to the Indian Ocean. Now, you're looking at the deployments of the German Navy for the first time in decades. You've deployed a frigate, you've deployed a tanker here, and there promises to be many more such deployments. Do you see Germany becoming part of some kind of larger military alliance or coalition in the region, like, say, the Quad?
So I don't see Germany joining the Quad very quickly. Quad is a very established format. You know, we don't want to make it a quint, and I think it's these four countries have every reason to be in the Quad. So we are looking with great sympathy and interest what the Quad does, and we are very happy with it. Yeah. But what we will see, you know, you have seen the frigate in 22. Yes. We have seen the frigate in 24. So what we will see in the future is that maybe jointly with other European countries, with other NATO allies, we will show our presence in the area. You know, everybody talks about the frigate. We should not forget there is one very important exercise which is maybe even more surprising, or not surprising, but it shows more this shift, this paradigm shift we are undergoing. This is Tarang Shakti, you know, this air exercise, the Air Force exercise in Coimbatore in August, where for the first time the German Air Force came with a big delegation and lots of planes to do a joint exercise with the Indian Air Force, and French and Spanish planes joined this, and I think we had a wonderful and very useful exercise. Everybody went home enthusiastic about, you know, the level of professionality, the level of hospitality also. So I think that's a first, and there will certainly be seconds and thirds.
There'll be seconds and thirds. Yeah. And the question in India, a lot of people are asking, is that Germany goes into elections a few weeks from now. Will this focus on India continue under a new government and successive governments, or is this a center-left agenda?
You should be completely reassured that foreign policy is very consensual in Germany when it comes to the main parties. So the focus on India paper will prevail under which government ever comes. You know, there are two candidates, either the incumbent chancellor or the conservative candidate, who will be elected on 23rd of February. But I think you can be sure that this is our guideline for India policy, whoever is the chancellor in the coming years. We all feel, you know, opposition like the current government, that India is worth every step towards a more in-depth and intense partnership. So that's our guideline for the years to come.
It's a guideline for years to come. And at the beginning, you told me something, Dr. Ackermann, that you bet on China for the first time. China changed. The Russian bet was your next one, or rather it was your first one. You first bet on Russia, then you bet on China, and now both these countries changed, and now you're betting on India, focus on India. Is there some fear in Germany that India could change as well?
So I would say that, you know, democracies are very different in every part of the world. There is no one formula for democracy. So Indian democracy is unlike German democracy. American democracy is unlike German democracy. So we should not have our measurements taken when we talk about Indian democracy. But what I'm completely convinced of is that this country, with its federal setup, you know, with the state governments and the center government, will never turn into some authoritarian regime like China or Russia are. So you have, through the institutional setup of India, through its constitution, you have a balance of power that I think is completely reliable. So I'm very confident that this country will continue to work on this democratic you know, basis of its constitution in the years to come. So unlike China and Russia, where if one person holds power, change can be happening quickly. Here you have always counterbalance, you know, with state governments, with Rajya Sabha, with the Supreme Court. You know, you have so many checks and balances here that I don't see India turning into some authoritarian regime at all, actually.
Right, and that wouldn't be good for India and for Germany, as you understand it. But thank you very much, Dr. Ackermann, for your time and your thoughts.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.